Welcome back to episode number 2, right? We're already at number 2, y'all, of the Leader You're Becoming podcast, where we talk about leadership, stewardship, and ultimately how to create a workplace environment that people don't hate to go to every single day. And they actually enjoy it, and they love to come to work every single day. I know it sounds crazy in today's society, but it is possible. Again, I'm your host, Coach T. I've had over 20 years experience in leadership, as early as 15 years old. So if I had to 15 years old, it's much more years than 20 years. Oh, good Lord, I'm getting old. But over 20 plus years of leadership experience, from small companies, startups to multi-billion-dollar, companies where I had to oversee $300 million of revenue, from taking a company from a mom and pop shop, supporting it, helping it through its growth to ultimately selling the business at that point in time. So I've seen a lot of different angles of leadership. I will not get on here and act like I know everything. I am still in the grind, still in the fight, still learning things, still growing as a leader tremendously. And I want to talk a little bit about that today during our episode number 2, which is, I have to have my notes for all of you. If this is your first time, I have my notes because I like to stay organized, which is who do you have to become while still leveling up your business. Again, who do you have to become while still leveling up your business? And I believe this is actually one of those hidden secrets, if you will, of leadership. And it's this: you don't really see it until after it's already too late, which is you're growing as a leader, right? And you're executing in that growth, and you've had success. And then while you are having success, most people are just enjoying the success, they're growing. But what's happening is that business is going from, let's just say, 10 million to a $20 million business, or $1 million to $2 million business, or $1 million to $5 million, whatever. It doesn't really matter, right? 100 to $1 billion business. But as it's growing, what's required at the next level of that business, at that new level of revenue, if you will, or whatever that might be, number of clients, actually requires a different leader as well. And one of the scariest things for a leader is to grow a business, grow themselves, get the business growing, and then realize they're not the right leader anymore for that business, because they stopped growing, because what was working was so successful and it increased that business. But they didn't realize while that business was growing and you're enjoying all that success and all the work that you put in from here to get to here, you actually had to keep growing and leveling up and skilling up yourself to now be the right leader at this moment in time. Once that business got to its new ceiling, or a plateau, if you will, that became the floor. And now that business needs to go here, but you need to continue to work as a leader. And this is actually a problem, a major problem, where you had success, right? You've done all the things. You've hit your targets, you hit your goals, you hit your 5-year goal, you hit your BHAG, if you follow EOS or anything of that nature, right? Your big, hairy, audacious goal. You hit it. And then you're there and you just want to just enjoy it for a moment. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with enjoying it and taking it all in. Oftentimes this might mean an exit, for an owner or a leadership team, where there's financial incentive. There may be some vacations or stock options, whatever. It really doesn't matter. But what I'm here to say today is, while you're growing and you're in the fight, you still actually have to be leveling up on the back end, in the grind again, because once you get there, it's going to require something else. And one of my favorite books that really brought this to my awareness is What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And I believe that's by Marshall Goldsmith, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm wrong with that, I'm sorry. But what got you here won't get you there, right? And it's just that ability to be able to be in the fight and still keep developing. And what happens is when that happens, the business actually bottlenecks by the leader. And it is absolutely confusing to a leader, because what happens is they're like, it was just working. And so what leaders do, they fall into the trap to say, oh, what we were doing, we're just not doing good enough. We just need to make it better, or we need to be more efficient with that thing. And that may be true in some scenarios, right? The next level does require a different level of efficiency, right, within your processes. But the other thing often is true is the leader actually didn't grow. That leader did not grow their emotional intelligence skill. And I do believe emotional intelligence is a skill that can be developed, right? They didn't understand and recognize their capacity, right, to handle stress and pressure. Did not improve and increase. They didn't grow internally. And that's what I'm really talking about today. A leader has to be willing to keep growing internally while the business is growing, while what they were working on before got better. They actually still have to continue to grow. And you hear about this oftentimes where somebody may sell a business and let's just say sell it to private equity. And then private equity comes in. Private equity runs at a different speed, y'all, than everybody else, right? Like, it's not like big corporate, because big corporate can be, it could be a bureaucracy, right? But like private equity is like, we could be just as big as big corporate, but we're going to be fast about it, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean it's good or bad. It's just the reality of what it is because of the nature of how private equity works. And that's okay, right? Not right, bad, good or bad or anything of that nature. But if that owner who may have sold or that leadership team that may have been there, if they're not ready and prepared for the capacity of, hey, before what got us here was we solved one problem a month. And every time we solved the problem, 12 months later, we solved 12 big problems. And hey, we had a successful time. Whereas now the new ownership or the new requirement is in the competitive market, you have to solve 3 problems a month. Not 3 little problems. You got to solve 3 big problems a month. Well, that's 3x. So then that means I got to be 3x more efficient. I have to handle 3x more possibly the pressure. I have to be 3x more creative or 3x more resourceful, regardless, whatever that might need to be. And the speed at which it's happening, what used to take me 3 months to accomplish, I now have to do in 1 month, right? And the ability to be able to do that actually starts inside. And that's what I want to talk about today. In this podcast, this is about you, who you're becoming. Yes, there's going to be some tactics. Yes, there's going to be some things and tools that we can talk about, and I'll leave in the show notes, which I did last week. There's some things you can go and walk away with, and books and tools and things you can take. Those things are fine. But if you don't change who you are, if you don't continue to grow and see a different version of you and then step into that different version and continuously going through that process, you are going to struggle, and it's going to be a bottleneck, and you might be led to think the people around you just aren't good enough. You might be led to think that the processes just aren't good enough. You might be led to think that, oh, the competitors are doing something more than you're doing. You might be led to think that, oh, I don't have enough money in marketing, or my marketing is not good enough, or my salespeople are not good enough, or I don't have AI, right? I don't have enough AI in my business. And the actual bottleneck is you as a leader. And so that's one of those things. That's really what the essence of this podcast is, and this episode specifically. With that being said, I got to have a front row seat of this in action, right? And one of my former bosses who sold the business, he brought me in because he had grown the business to a certain point, and he ran into a bottleneck. And he thought the bottleneck was, hey, I need, some more leaders on the team that, can see around the corner, see the future, or at least see the vision I see, and are willing to run with me at the speed in which I'm ready to run this race, which are all true. That's where I came in. That's where we brought in some other leaders behind me, etc. However, I will say, as the person who was responsible for making it work, he, as an individual, actually had to grow. He actually was the number one contributing factor to the success of the business, because even if I came in, and let's say I was an all-star, whatever, superstar. I'm not saying I am. Let's just assume in this scenario, I was a superstar. My ability would have a bumped up against his identity. And that's what I'm saying. Business owners, leaders, if you don't grow, the superstar players that you have, their ability and their greatness will bump up against your identity, and you will stall them out. And we'll get to what happens later when that happens, right? In the episode here. You will stall them out. And I watched him have to expand his capacity. My previous owner, the previous owner of the business, right? I watched him expand himself personally. I watched him have to expand the vision and what he believed for himself. I watched him have to expand his ability to like let go. I watched him break, literally, like watched him break physically, emotionally, right? Like, not saying he was like boohoo crying or anything like that, but I watched the evolution. And as he grew, right, more capacity happened. It allowed for the leadership team that he brought in to do like this. As he grew, we were like, okay, we can keep going. He grew, we were like, okay, we can keep going. Now we had this capacity. Now watch this. We had the capacity to keep doing it. But once he started growing, expanding, it gave room for us to work within greater levels of capacity, right? We were able to be more decisive. We were able to take more risk, right? As an owner, it's hard. It's hard to take risk. It's your money on the line, right? Like, it's easy for like me to be like, oh yeah, let's go buy this $10,000 piece of equipment. It's easy, like, because I'm like, yeah, I need the equipment, make it work. But like, as an owner, you are the one paying for that equipment. You are the one that has to put your family's livelihood on the line for Coach T's recommendation, right? And if you don't have the capacity to trust, this is an example, you will say, no, don't get that piece of equipment. I think there's a better way. But you've already been working a better way before I got here. And your way wasn't working. And now that would be the definition, as some people would say, of insanity. You're doing the same thing over and over again. Then you just brought this other person in who can see around the corner and is willing to make the investment and manage the process through better than you did, but you say no because you don't have the capacity to trust. And that's a prime example, and that was actually a true story, right? Where it was like, there was a moment in time where he was like, I don't like this idea. And I was like, okay, this is the best idea we got right now. And he was like, and I remember, he said, this is not the decision I would make, but I have entrusted you to run this business in this way. You do it, but I reserve the right to tell you I was right. And I said, okay, that's fine. That's all right. Cool. I'll take that. That's cool. And guess what? We did it. We launched it. And it's even more successful today than it was before, right? We learned and we kept growing in that. But I remember that was a critical moment in time where his personal growth allowed for that capacity for us to do this, right? I was ready to do this, but the owner or that leader has to. And this happens each and every day on your team, right? If you do not increase your capacity, what's going to happen is you're going to stall people out. You're going to create hesitation in the business. And if you create hesitation in the business, then you're eroding trust in the business because things become unclear. And we talked about that last time, and I'm going to say this throughout this whole entire podcast, at least for season 1. Clarity equals trust, and trust equals speed, right? Tip my cap to the Speed of Trust book, recommended by one of my VPs. I appreciate that so much. If you haven't read that book by Stephen Covey, his son, whose name is Stephen Covey, I believe. But it's called The Speed of Trust. And there's a lot of data that actually ties to financial growth, tied to actually how fast things are done, which we can all understand, but it's actually tied to trust. And so, but I believe before we can even get to trust, right? Clarity first. Once it's clear, people can trust. And then once people trust, they can move fast. Right? And fast doesn't necessarily have to mean like extremely fast. It could be efficient, whatever that might look like for you and your business. So with that being said, that is the problem. If a leader is not willing to keep growing while they are growing internally, while the outside is growing, it's going to bottleneck the business. So what happens, right? What's the impact outside of bottleneck? How's the impact? Margins, they're eroded. Margins get eroded. Profit gets suppressed. Why? Because ideas start to like funnel out. People become protective, right? Like you work so hard to get to this point. It's like, are you really willing to try to blow it up? And in reality, yes, you should grow and then still say, how can I disrupt my business for the next future, the next ability to be able to look around the corner. That's one of the things we talk about as one of our 5 leadership abilities each and every day. Is your ability to be able to predict is one of them, short term and long term, right? As a leader, you have to be able to predict. That doesn't mean you have to be right, but you do have to be able to predict and be like at least right or directionally right. We talk about all the time, right? I don't need to be perfectly right because I don't know the future. I don't know what's about to happen in 30 seconds from now. So why would I be able to predict 10 years from now? Okay. So like we could take the pressure off of like perfect prediction, but we can say at the end of the day, hey, I can see the trend going this way, or my gut is saying this. Sometimes it is just that, right? Like your experience, and you have to ride with that sometimes, because there's a lot of ambiguity in leadership that you have to get comfortable with. And you can say, you know what, I'm gonna at least be directionally right. I can figure everything else out from there. I can be resourceful from there. So what happens when a leader is not willing to try to disrupt their own business? Well, I think about Amazon, right? Amazon, in its early days, really wanted to be the greatest bookstore on earth, right? They want to have every book on the planet, at least one copy of it. If I'm not mistaken, if the story is correct. But then Jeff Bezos realized that, you know what? Things are going to actually start going digital. So why don't we just do it? Which actually kills their business, their physical book business. They said, we are going to cannibalize our own business before somebody else does. And as an owner and as a leader who has this level of like change, you have to be willing to say, this is working, I'm successful, and I'm going to beat it up. I'm going to go past it. I'm going to beat my old success down, right? And that might look different for you. That may not always be. I'm not just here talking about revenue and profit growth and margins or anything of that nature, right? That might be, you know what got us here culturally is good, but like we can still be better, right? What got us here in our training program as we develop leaders, it's good. It might be top of the market, but could it be better? Right? And all those things can translate to profits and margins, etc. But it doesn't have to be the goal, if you will. Right? I hope that you understand that. Cool. With that being said, what else does it do? How else does this impact your A players, right? And we talk about, A players, B players, C players all the time, within my world, which is like A players are, your 5-star recruit, right? If you were talking about college sports, your 5-star recruit, your top quarterback, your top receiver, who's at the top of the food chain, making the most money if you were looking at it from a sports analogy, right? An A player. And what happens is the top talent, A players, they don't want to play for a leader who's also not an A player. I'll say that again. Oftentimes we're talking about like, hiring A players or, recruiting the best talent, whatever language, your industry uses. But like, you actually have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, am I an A leader? Because yes, I might be able to trick that, A player during the interview process. The recruiter might be great. And their managers might. The people who are interviewing. But once they get in there and they look around and they see like the standard is not as high as they talked about. They're not pushing themselves to be excellent. My leader isn't trying to grow. He's trying to just do everything the same as he's always done or she's always done without any like growth in mind, right? Even if it's just efficiency around it. Well, then guess what? Like, I don't want to be here. Right? I could go take my talent somewhere else. Like LeBron said, I could take my talent to South Beach. Right? And so that's something that you really as a leader have to understand that. Like, if you want an A player on your team, you better be an A player. Or you better be striving to be an A player for where you are. And then as it grows, you better keep striving to be an A player as well. Because, where I'm from, we used to say game recognize game. Real recognize real. And that's something that will have a major impact. And you think, they're just a job hopper. No, they're not a job hopper. They're just not going to say anywhere that does not, their identity is clashing up against the identity of the business. And if the business says they're exceptional and they're excellent and they're innovative and they're all these things, when they get in there, they better see it. So as a leader, you have a great opportunity to say, you know what, hey, I am somebody that when they walk through this door, they're going to say, okay, my leader is grinding with me. They don't have it all figured out. They don't know everything, but I can trust them. They get the work done and they're still growing. Oh yeah, I can work with that. And that's what A players are going to say. right? Impact obviously on clients, and suppliers. Like clients are just going to be like, all right, if you guys just keep doing the same thing, after a while, what's going to happen? Somebody else is going to come around and they're going to repackage what you're doing in a little bit better way, and they're going to move on. So you have to be able to continue to grow so that the business continues to make better offerings for clients. Suppliers, they want to see growth. They are predicting that you're going to grow. Their job is to help you grow so that as you grow, you keep using them and you keep using more of their supplies. Pretty straightforward. So this is the impact. So what do we do about it, right? Like we're talking about the problem of not growing. We talk about the impact of that problem, but what are some actual solutions? And the number one solution that I've been hinting at this whole time is you have to have a different vision for yourself. Point blank and simple. We cannot operate outside of the capacity or the identity that we believe of ourselves, right? We cannot operate outside of that capacity. And if we do, it'll be for moments of time, and then we'll come right back down, right? If you believe you are this level leader and you're like comfortable here, you might be able to have an A moment every now and then. But guess what? You'll have some C moments too. You're closest to having C moments. But you're never going to be able to consistently operate here if you don't believe that you can be here, right? And that's number one. And so I have a couple questions for you, right? If you're running a business, what would it take, right, for you to run a 10x business? Whatever your business is right now, what if it was 10x? What if it was 10x people? What if it was 10x revenue to produce 10x profit, right? The question becomes like, how do you have to think? Who do you have to be? How will you make decisions? How would you lead differently? How would you handle pressure? And that's the big one right there. How would you handle pressure if your business was 10x bigger? How would you have to show up? How many hours would you think you have to put in? Now we'll say this. Bigger business does not automatically equate to more hours worked. But directionally, oftentimes, it does have to happen, at least while during the building stages. Can't get away from that, right? Like, everybody looks at like, oh man, such and such only works 3 hours a week because that's what they say on their book and their podcast. And it's like, okay, that's cool. But go ask them how many hours they put in to get to a point where now they position themselves to leverage 3 hours a week. There's a lot of hours, thousands of hours that are untold to be able to say, now I have so much leverage, I can work 3 hours. But that's not what we're talking about. Well, that is one of the things we're talking about here. But as you're thinking about this, like, I just want to like caution of thinking like, oh, it automatically is going to be more hours. But I'm also saying that there probably will be up front until you get to a leverage point, right? How clear does your vision have to be, right? And I'm going to say to you now, it has to be crystal clear, right? I'll say that again. It may have to be perfectly crystal clear. It needs to be directionally clear. Excuse me, I'll take that back, right? It has to be directionally clear, meaning there is going to be a level of ambiguity. But what happens is with our brains is when we think about a problem, right, our brain starts to want to solve it, right? It will. It's like, okay, well, what would it look like? You start asking like really good questions. Tony Robbins talks about this all the time. You start asking yourself really good questions of like, like how, what would a 10x business look like? How would a 10x business, how happy would I be with a 10x business or whatever that might be for you, right? I'm just thinking of different things like, what would a great day look like walking into the building of a business that's 10x the size? It's $100 million. I'm a $10 million company now. Like, what would a great day look like, right? What would I need to be? How many people would be here? And you start going through this process. And what happens is your brain starts to start solving. Whether consciously or not, your brain is like, problem. It's like, we got to solve, right? But what happens, now this is the, please catch this. What happens is, not only does it start to solve, it starts to show you your gap. It says, oh, this is what it looks like, but this is where you are. Look at all this uncertainty. That's that gap in between there is uncertainty. And it starts to show you, well, you don't really handle pressure that well. You don't really know how to like work through your balance sheet. You don't really know how to like run this department, you don't really know how to like recruit really well. I'm just using all these different examples, right? Like you don't really know how to do X, Y, and Z well. You're unfamiliar with this. You guys just launched this business. Like you don't really know. And then it starts to say, oh, these are all the things of what you would need, but this is where you are. And your level of emotional intelligence, and I would say emotional maturity, to be able to understand and work through that pressure and that ambiguity to get from this person to that person is going to be the key to success. Period. And then you have to, and as you're starting to build through to that person, then you'll start to see your brain. It's like, oh yeah, this is how we do it. And this is how we do it. And then you're leveling up. You're just slowly leveling up. So number one, you got to have a clear vision, right? Or a directionally right vision. Don't need to be perfect. It can be a little cloudy. That's fine. Directionally right. And you'll hear that a lot because I believe it's so much ambiguity out there. And I'll keep saying this, that you don't have to be perfect. Just be directionally right, right? Like if I say I want to go to California and I'm, on the East Coast, I'm like, all right, go west. Hey, just go west, right? Like I'm directionally right. I know I can get to California going west compared to going south, right? Period. Like I know that. If I go west, I can figure it out. I can catch the right freeway and whatnot. There's some sign will say California at some point in time, somewhere, and I'll figure it out from there. And that's how it is sometimes in leadership. And that's okay. I'm telling you, just be comfortable with that. That's okay. Number two, besides a vision for yourself, got to get a mentor. Right? I just truly believe that. Now, I said a mentor, but this could be a little different for some people. Some people may have multiple mentors, and each one may be in a different category or a little slice of life, if you will, or slice of the business. Have to have a mentor, right? Or mentors. You may have that one person that kind of meets all the criteria, or you're one of those people that are just like, got to have this one person to go to, then that's fine. And having that mentor, somebody that's been through it, seen around the corner, been around the corner, built the block around the corner that you're trying to turn, is so helpful. It is so helpful. So mentorship is a solution as well. The next one, number three, I would say is get a peer group, right? Like I joined Vistage, and I love it, right? And the biggest thing that I love was like being in that room. I'm like, and there is some ridiculous talent in my Vistage group. Shout out to my Vistage group, squirrels. It is ridiculous talent, and people, I'm just like, oh my gosh, how am I even in the room with you? I am like thanking God every time we meet. The fact that I'm in a room with them, and just to hear that we're actually all solving the same problems. We're actually all solving the exact same problems. They're just different. They're the same problem, just at different scales, sometimes with a little bit of nuance, but principally it's the same problem. And to be able to hear people talk about the problem from a different perspective, and hear people how they solve the problem, some of the insight, it is so beneficial. Please, as a leader, for the love of sweet baby Jesus, find you a group that you can connect with. And it's okay if the group you're with and they're not on your level, or it's not connecting or whatever. Change it out. Do not get caught in I tried that. Change it out. Same thing with a mentor. Oh, that didn't really work. Change it out. It doesn't mean the principle didn't work because that person didn't work. Change it out. Right? Like that's like starting a business and it failed and be like, oh, I'm never gonna do that again. Business doesn't work. When you got thousands of examples of successful businesses. No, that one you had just didn't work. Change it out. Change your group out. Change your mentor out. So also, and then last but not least here, it's like obviously read. Leaders are readers. Now, I will say this. There's this old saying that, knowledge is power. I do not personally believe that. Knowledge is not power. The application of knowledge over time, that's a key. The application of knowledge consistently over time, not perfectly over time, but consistently over time, leads to power, right? And so that's really just a personal belief, right? Can't say it's perfect truth, right? As people would say, it's my truth. But at the end of the day, like, yes, reading, get exposed to new information. But I'm telling you right now, if you get exposed to it and you don't do nothing with it, you're just doing mental gymnastics, okay? At the end of the day. And I can speak from this, like this is like really deep and like from my soul, because I used to be that person. I used to be that person that would just like read the book, and go read another book, and go read another book, and go read another book. Now, I will say, when I started reading, I remember like my income was just doing like, a little trinket here or there, whatever. And then when I started reading, it was like a hockey stick. So, but when I look back, I can say, oh, I started implementing little bits and pieces along the way, but I wasn't really intentional. It was just exposure, right? And so with that, then when I was like, oh, I'm gonna intentionally do it, it was like at one point in time, right? And so I'm here to say that yes, just reading the books is a good thing, but if you're getting exposed to this information, go apply it. Go figure a way out how to implement it into the business, into your day-to-day, and I promise you, one idea can change everything, right? Just reading exposure, you'll get there. So you might be going here, a little reading exposure here like I did, and then when you start implementing, it goes like this. And yes, your income can do that. And yes, your income can even do that if you have a job. And we can get into that a whole other conversation later. So that's one of those big things as well. So as a business, if you're not reading and you're an owner of a company, do your people a favor and read. And if you're an owner of a company or you're a leader of the company and you're not reading, like please, for your sake, you got to do this. You got to expose yourself to this information. And so with that being said, right, there are risks with all these things, right? We got the solution. We talked about the problem. We talked about the impact of the problem. We talked about some solutions. What are the risks, right? Obviously, like I just alluded to with reading, if you don't apply anything, the risk is nothing happens. Period. Obviously, a mentor, alluded to it again. You can have a mentor and it might not work and you have to go search it out and it may cost you money because you paid for this when they were trash and then you got to go to somebody else. That's okay. It's a part of it. You may join a Vistage group, or not Vistage group, but that wasn't a plug for Vistage, but they don't pay me, but like Vistage is great. But there's other groups out there as well. There's different masterminds, whatever. Like you're going to go through some trial and error. There is risk involved. You're probably going to spend some money on it. But at the end of the day, if any of those things can help you 10 to 100x your business, it's like, come on. Like, what are we talking about here, right? At the end of the day. And so I will leave you, I'll leave you with this as we wrap this thing up. I believe we're all, again, made out of the image of God. And if that's the case, then we have the ability to grow. And everything that God created grows. It naturally grows. It does have its seasons, right? Right? That's why you never like look at somebody and be like, oh, you're down right now. It just might be a season, right? It might be their winter season in their life or in their leadership or what have you. And so with that being said, you have the capacity to grow. The question isn't if you have the capacity to grow. The question is, are you willing to do the things to grow? Are you willing to even see that you have the capacity, right? And that old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. If I have any of my more seasoned listeners, if you will, or even some young people that think that, you're going to get to a certain point and you're not going to grow anymore. I believe that is a lie from the pit of hell, that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I don't even know if that's possible. If it is, the pit of hell part of it, right? I'm just saying it is a lie. Absolutely, as a human, and science is showing us this even more so today, that like neuroplasticity, like the ability to continue to learn and grow, is possible, 1,000% possible. You may need to do it a little bit different for each individual, but the ability to be able to grow and learn and continue to expand all the way through 80, 90, 100 is totally possible. Your strategy for it might be different. So with that being said, this is an opportunity for you as a leader to say, okay, I've been successful. I've grown this business. I started this business. It's moving. And guess what? To get to that next place that I need to be, I got to keep growing myself. And I can keep growing. And if I don't, the impact that it's going to have on my business and my people, I'm going to find out. And it might be a slow route to find that out. But if I don't keep growing, I will find out. And so I want to encourage you today that you've been made aware, right? If you didn't hear before, or this is confirmation, just let this be known. I've seen this myself. I've seen bottlenecks before. I've had success, and I look back now and I'm like, oh my jeez, I didn't keep growing. I didn't. And so I'm speaking from the heart with much love. Again, this is episode 2. Thank you for tuning in to the Leader You're Becoming podcast, where we talk about leadership, stewardship, and ultimately how to create an environment, a work culture that people don't hate to go to every day. They love it. I am Coach T, and I appreciate you. If this has been beneficial for you, I trust you are smart enough to subscribe and follow and do your thing. I want to hear from you in the comments. Also, let me know what you think. God bless.